255.551 Scope. Upgrading version. 255.552 to 557 the part prescribe the minimum quantity qualified pipeline increase maximal allowable operating pressure. Notification requirement. The maximum allowable operating pressure for any of the transmission maximum main operating with a pressure of 125 psi shall not be raised with the lowered without submitting a letter of the intent with at least 60 days prior to the proposed change of the state said by a certified operator pressure with a letter of the intent and indicate with the degree of the maximal allowable operating pressure statement example and any explanation to be included. All publishers involved with the recertification project shall be in accordance with these requirements. In the event of emergency, verbal permission may be detained, but the written application must be filled promptly. In addition, with any operator proposing to increase the maximal operating pressure of the pipeline are legally constructed to operate at pressure less than 150 psi gauge to pressure 120 psi gauge or more shall comply with the reporting requirements. Reporting requirements subdivision A of the section. Increase the pressure proposed with 3 years of the initial operation of the pipeline. High pressure proposed would fall with the definition of the major utility transmission facility as set forth in section 122 of the Public Service Law. Hearing held when the proposed increase unless such hearing was waived by the commission of the application staff of the department. Addition with respect to any such increase, the operator shall addition of the reporting requirements set forth above provide in writing of the staff the basis of the need for the increase of the discussion of how increase will serve the public interest of the fancy and with the necessity of such assurance the staff may require, including documentation that new undue hazard will result from the operation of the line at a higher pressure. See at least 60 days prior to the increase the maximum allowing operating pressure of the distribution system over the limit set below. The operator shall submit a letter of intent in the event of emergency. Verbal permission may be detained. Written notification must be filed promptly. Maximum allowable operating pressure between 1/2 psi gauge and 60 psi gauge note is required for the increase of the pressure greater than 106 psi gauge. Maximum allowable operating pressure of 60 psi gauge to 124 psi gauge notice is required for increase of the pressure greater than 10% of the current maximum allowable operating pressure. And 3. Converting a low pressure distribution system to a high pressure system not exceeding 124 psi gauge. General requirement. The pressure must be increased gradually. The rate control of the prior to the first pressure increase at the end of each incremental increase of the pressure must be held with a constant while the entire segment of the pipeline that is affected with the leak surveyed. Each has the leak detected must be repaired before the further pressure of the increase is made. All leak must be repaired as soon as possible following the completion of the upgrading. Each operator upgrade of the segment of the pipeline shall retain the line with the segment of the record investigated required by this part. All of the work performed on each of the pressure tests is connected with the connection with the upgrading. Each operator who upgrades the segment of the pipeline shall establish written procedure and ensure the compliance with each applicable requirement of this part. So provided in section 255.555C with this part with the new maximum allowable operating pressure may not exceed the maximum allowed under the section 255, 619, and 621 the part with the new segment pipeline constructed. Same material, same location. However, when the upgrading of the steel pipeline is unvariable and necessary to determine the design pressure under the design formula. Section 255.105 of this part is unknown. The maximum allowable working pressure may be increased as provided in section 255, 619A1 of this part. Which one was that? Unless the requirements of the upgrading the pressure 125 psi and more in steel pipelines. Unless the requirements section have met with the no pressure noise subject with the segment of the steel pipe pressure for the 125 psi or more that is above the established maximum allowable operating pressure. For increasing operating pressure above the previously established maximum allowable operating pressure, the operator should comply with the following requirements: review the design, operating, maintenance, the history of the previous testing segment of the pipeline, determine whether the proposed increase of the shape of the consistent with the requirements of this part, make any repairs, replacement, alteration segments of the pipeline, history of the shape of the operation, increase pressure of the very condition of the pipe with the use of the test excavator, either prove the compliance with the non-destructive testing requirement of section 255, 241, and 243D with the part with the current class location for the non-destructive testing, sufficient number of the wells to achieve the compliance, minimum percent listed in 243B with a part of the current class location. Non-destructive testing is required by the operator shall select the wells of the 150 feet or habitable structure with a minimum percentage of the achieved. Shall have adequate cathodic protection complying with the section 255, 463 of this part. After complying with subdivision D with this section, the operator may increase the maximal allowable rating pressure for the segment of the pipe constructed before September 12, 1970. Highest pressure that is permitted under section 255, 619 of this part, using the test pressure for the highest pressure to which segment of the pipeline previously subjected to either the strength test of the actual operation after complying with the subdivision B of this section. The operator does not qualify with the subdivision C section may increase the previously established maximal allowable operating pressure at least once the following requirements are met. The segment of the pipeline successfully tested in accordance with the requirements of the part of the new line with the same material with the same location. Increased maximal allowable operating pressure may be the established segment of the pipe line class 1 location of those not been previously tested and is impractical to test in accordance with the requirements of this part. New maximal operating pressure design exceed 80% of the allowable new line, same design, same location. Operator determine the new maximal allowable operating pressure consistent with the condition of the segment of the pipeline design requirements of the part. Where the segment of the pipeline is upgraded in accordance with subdivision C with the paragraph D2 of this section, the increase of the pressure must be made in increments that are equal to 10% of the pressure before upgrading and 25% of the total pressure increase, whichever produces the fewer number of increments. Alright, 255, 557, upgrading pressure less than 250 psi gauge. Those requirements of the section have been met. No person subject to the segment of the steel and plastic pipeline higher maximal allowable operating pressure for less than 155 psi gauge. Increase of the maximal allowable operating pressure of the cast iron, ductile iron, wrought iron, or pipeline segment is prohibited without prior approval. Before increasing operating pressure above the previously established maximal allowable operating pressure, operators should comply with the following increments. Review the design, operating maintenance, the history of the segment of the pipeline, make a leakage survey that has been more than 1 year since the last survey. Repair any leaks that have been found. Make any repairs, replacements, alterations, segments of the pipeline necessary for safe operation. Increase pressure for effective coded seal system. Establish adequate cathodic protection complying with the section 255, 463 of this part. For effective coded bare steel system, perform a review of the active corrosion. Isolate with the cathodic protection with all the coded segment. All surfaces of the reactive corrosion exhibit the established adequate with the cathodic protection and complying with the section 255, 463 of this part. 6. Reinforcement anchor offset of the bend of the dead end of the pipe joint with impression, couplings, bell, and the tibet gut joints to prevent failure of the pipe joint if an offset bend with the dead end with the exposed with the excavation. 7. Isolate segments of the pipeline with pressure for the increase with the adjacent segment will continue with the operator with the low pressure and pressure for the main with the surface line with the both and higher than pressure for the delivered with the customer install the surface regulator adequate capacity on each service line. Test each new existing surface regulator, verify the functional property be adequately vented and complying with the section 255, 355, and 744E of this part. Pressure may be increased if necessary to test each regulator after the regulator has been installed on each pipeline subject to increased pressure. After complying with subdivision C of the section, the increase of the maximal operating pressure must be made with a increment equal to 10 psi gauge or 25% of the total pressure increase, whichever produces the fewer number of the increments whenever the requirements of paragraph C and D of the section apply must meet the two approximate equal increment increases. Alright. And 255, 59 was repealed. That was upgrading inversion.